It's 6 o'clock on, Thursday evening, September 23rd. This is the sixth of a series of 7 public input sessions sponsored by the City Council of Topeka's Public Health and Safety Committee. The title of our event this evening is Changing the Culture of Property Maintenance. We can do this. And we want to welcome everyone here. We are in the city's holiday building conference room, so we have some people here live and some on Zoom, so what they call a hybrid meeting. I'm Karen Hiller. I'm the chair of the committee, and I represent District 1, Council District 1, and if both of my colleagues from the committee are here or online, so if you would introduce yourselves.
Christina Valdivia Alcala, City Council District 2 representative.
Neil? Councilman Dobler may have stepped away, but Councilman Neil Dobler from District 7 is on our committee and will be joining us this evening as well. I see also, I want to welcome online Councilwoman Sylvia Ortiz from District 3, City Manager Brent Trout, who's here live in the audience. We need your name again. Tom Rodman from the Fire Department, from the Fire Inspection Division, Fire Marshal's Division. John Chardine from Property Maintenance. He's the supervisor of the Code Compliance Inspectors. We have with us Latoya Burnett from the Community Engagement Division. They have been supporting getting the word out about these programs and are also keeping records. And then our own Liz Toyne from the Council Office, who has helped us in many ways get all this together and get the records out. What we have in mind this evening is primarily engagement of our citizen guests who are here. Our thought when we set these up was that everyone who came to offer public input was going to be someone who already had some experience with code compliance and had an idea or a strategy to share with us. Our focus, this committee has worked for the last 18 months or so to get a full review of what's happening with the property maintenance code and its enforcement, particularly via Mike Haugen, who's the division director for code compliance. It's been very thorough. We wanted to make sure that we had reviewed everything in that code, as well as the staff's description of how things were going in enforcement and what they saw as challenges before we opened things up for public input. That said, we hoped to do this a year ago, and with COVID, we didn't. So what happened is that we put together as a committee some aspirational goals and some preliminary recommendations, and spent about 6 or 8 months at the beginning of this year with staff, with City Manager Trout, with Mike Haugen from Property Maintenance, and Lieutenant Badel from the Police Department, who's over that division, to talk about what they thought and sort of refine the challenge goals that we had come up with, as well as get some feedback from them on what kind of response they could make. And so that was really productive time. What we have then, and hopefully if those of you from the public who have not been aware of it yet, staff created a web page for this work within the City of Topeka's website at www.topeka.org. And we have those preliminary recommendations from this committee on that website. We have the staff's response to that on that website. The PowerPoint that you'll see today is there, as well as all the documentation from all those meetings that we had over that year and a half, if you want to do the deep dive into that. Additionally, the property maintenance code itself, our version of it, and also some sections from other parts of the city's municipal code that apply. So lots and lots of resources. If people want to do a deep dive as well, Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala discovered a YouTube video of a session similar to ours where people had worked with a consultant regarding property maintenance compliance. And there were a lot of great ideas. And so there's a link on the invitation poster that everybody got virtually or on paper to that YouTube, and it too is on that website. So just so that you know, what we are doing otherwise with that website is keeping notes, starting even before we went to the city council, on the feedback and ideas that people have given us. And each session, one of the things that LaToya is doing is taking some notes for us, and then we're capturing the input that you have, and it is going onto a sheet, a page just with that input, and those are being added to the website as well. The website also has a portal, so if after this evening somebody has a further thought, or somebody who's online wants to submit something directly, it's a very simple opportunity to just get in there and give us those ideas directly, and we are capturing those ideas as well in that note sheet that we're adding and updating after each session. So, again, we appreciate that you're here. One of the things we have done at the beginning of each of these sessions is to quickly ask our public guests to give their names if they choose, but at least tell us what neighborhood you're from, so we have an idea of what sort of representation that we have at our session. If we can go to our guests that are online, if you could just briefly, your name if you wish, but tell us what neighborhood you represent. We'd love to hear from you. I think we have 2 online.
Hi, my name is Melissa Kirshner. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. My name is Melissa Kirshner, and I live in West Topeka, but my family also lives in Central Topeka, so I'm here representing both of those neighborhoods.
I'm sorry, it was a little bit garbled. So Central Topeka, is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, now I remember why I recognize your name. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I saw one other person. Yvonne Starlin?
Yes.
Wait, are you from Topeka, and what neighborhood, if you don't mind sharing?
I have properties in Oakland, and I also have properties over in the East Topeka area.
Okay, great, welcome. Also, I see that Councilwoman Nager from District 6 has joined us as well. Welcome, Councilwoman Nager. Now here in the audience, we have three guests from the public. And our eager assistant, Mr. Trout, will bring the mic around.
Lizone Grays. I live in downtown Topeka, but 99% of all the clients we work with come from all parts of Topeka.
Okay, thank you.
Susan McClarity, and I am with the Citizen Advisory Council and also Valley Park neighborhood, and I'm a landlord.
Kim Thompson, Vice President, Central Park NIA, Vice Chair of the CAC.
And Susan and Kim, between them, have been, I think, to all of these sessions. It's really great that you're providing that kind of leadership. Thanks for being there and coming back.
Hi, I'm Janine Anderson, and I live in Potland, but we own rental properties throughout the city.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Well, let's roll. We'll start with some background and some of those goals that I mentioned earlier. We'll start with the best we can in a hybrid setup, some head nodding and affirmation of some of these goals even as we first get started. I have found that's a little tricky when we're hybrid, but we'll see what we can do. Next slide, please. Okay, what we did as a committee was just to kind of ground ourselves was to come up with 4 goals that were why we're even here, what we all as a community, not just the committee, what we see as important for this whole property maintenance network of activities. So the first we had was safety of people. It's why cities do codes. Most people support that. Second was protection of structures. Third was maintenance of an attractive environment. And fourth, improvement of property values. Do those sound like reasonable goals, reasons that we're here tonight? I can't see online on any of these screens, so hopefully, there we go. That's
good.
helpful. Thank you. Sound reasonable? Let's go to the next slide. Thank you. Operational goals for enforcement. We do have codes and we do have enforcement, but we've got some principles of how we want to see that done. It seems that having our enforcement always be straightforward, kind, and fair is important to folks. Similarly, that it's cost effective. Doesn't mean we don't spend any money, but we need to get some results. Third, fully integrated with other departments. Something we realized as we as a committee got through this was, and we really appreciated Director Haugen bringing this up for us, is that even though people talk about property maintenance all the time, we actually have quite a few city departments involved in what we could call small p, small m, property maintenance. And fourth, fully integrated with other services. And what that meant was social services, support services, community support, and so on. Because we have a real strong helping community, we want to make sure that we can match folks up, people that need help and people that are willing to help. Sound reasonable? Next slide. Again, as far as those departments and other key players, when we started to name them off, here's the starting list. You may have some you would add. But property maintenance, of course, is a full division today of our police department. We also have police. They, for instance, are involved in getting inoperable vehicles off the street. They help with security in properties. If trespassing is occurring, they're critical. Fire. They're involved if making sure we have the appropriate exits, that people can exit a property safely through doors and windows into a safe place on the ground. They get involved in hoarding, and of course they get involved if there has been a fire and a structure is compromised or people are hurt. And also get involved in the investigation and the future of that property. Community engagement, again, are our support staff for citizens in general and particular for our neighborhoods. And so helping people figure out how to engage is part of their mission, as well as helping with meetings and things like that. So they're involved. Forestry. We have a separate part of our Topeka Municipal Code that has to do with vegetation and right-of-ways, alleys, easements, and so on. And the parking next to streets. And forestry is involved in maintaining that in a variety of ways. It's our engineering department that's responsible for sidewalks, making sure that they're even and therefore ADA accessible, and that they're not overgrown as well. And they actually are the ones who handle notices to property owners if they're not, as opposed to our property maintenance people at this point. Zoning also comes into play because if people are running a business on their property, for instance, maybe a junk business or something where they're just loading up their property with stuff and selling it, and so their inventory changes all the time, or if they're fixing cars, which is a business, it is our zoning who's under our planning department who's responsible to go take care of that, as well as signs. If people have put out a sign for any purpose, but a business related as well. We ended up talking with some young men who are doing intervention buying and rehab and infill last night, and they pointed out that in their issues, we realized that Our development services, building inspection people need to be on that list as well and aren't. It's not just all in the city. Shawnee County is involved where we really rely on them regarding tax sales. If we've got a property that has the owners have disappeared or the people aren't paying taxes, often it needs to go through the tax sale to clear the title and be able to get that property repurposed. And so they're very important to us. And they came up last night too. What was the other county thing? Trash. They run the trash service. And so when it has to do with dumping and pickups and working out arrangements that might work better in our community than what we're doing now, certainly Shawnee County Refuse was important. KDOT is Kansas Department of Transportation. That's mowing. One of the things that troubles people a lot is overgrown vegetation in the community. And everybody always points at the city, but it is KDOT that's responsible for the rights-of-way near our highways and around and under our bridges. And so we need them as a strong partner in all of what we're looking at as well. Neighborhood associations are involved in a whole variety of ways, supporting one another. They may have initiatives that they go after jointly or grants. One of the things that's been a topic of a lot of discussion lately is perhaps broadening out just how we support them and how they function to help each other in the ways that have been done in the past, but maybe others as well. There are individuals, and we listed them because almost all of us know of that person who goes and picks up the trash after the trash trucks go through, or who mows a couple of extra yards on their block or in their neighborhood to help somebody out, or because really nobody's mowing it and we just don't want it overgrown. And the individuals that take the time to try and do advocacy and move agendas forward or get their neighborhoods organized. Individuals are critical. The last item we listed as a committee was private sector. And as we've talked with people, that was kind of a lump group for us, but it includes private businesses who might help with training classes for people, or maybe coupon programs for borrowing tools. The nonprofit sector maybe deserves its own line, but certainly the social services that we have that help people in emergencies, but also all of our nonprofits that are doing housing rehab and housing development, owning and managing properties, helping homeowners. A lot of nonprofit sector involvement here in Topeka and in most cities. So we wanted to kind of lay that out. If there are others that people think of along the way, certainly include them in your thoughts, because we will, before we're all done, add to this list with some of those entities that were not named by name at first. Next slide, please. Examples of the issues that we addressed as we worked on it that we'd like to hear from you about are neglected structures, both the interiors and the exteriors. We should point out that we're talking about any structure, whether often we talk mostly about housing in these circles, but our codes cover both residential as well as commercial and industrial structures, anything, as well as outbuildings and so on. So we're interested in all of that. Certainly issues that come up are vegetation. We have for a long time had our code compliance, our property maintenance code people have been writing up grasses that get over 12 inches tall, but not those other things like shrubs, trees, and vines that emerge out of that. And we have a preliminary commitment from senior staff that we will add that back in, which is important to a lot of people, but we have to figure out how we're going to phase that in and how we're going to address it. So that's why that's there. Junk and trash on people's properties. Inoperable vehicles seem to be a perennial problem for not just our older neighborhoods and lower income neighborhoods. We hear that from all over from time to time. And the vegetation issue happens in our more affluent districts, often when there's been a foreclosure or an abandoned property. We hear a lot of that then. So we want there are procedures. So we can talk about enforcement. If people have comments or suggestions on how we can improve, We get criticism, and all those of us on the council hear from people a lot. Sometimes it scares people and so on, but sometimes that's what it takes to make it work. We've had a lot of suggestions, though, on how it could improve, and we want to hear those. The process as well. Process meaning everything from a preliminary consult so that an inspector doesn't even need to come out, to an inspection, to then extensions, administrative hearings, and court. How is that process going? Are there ways we could improve? And then, of course, those fundamentals of fairness that we talked about in terms of how people want to see the system work. And above all, at the end of the day, are we getting the results that we want? And if not, how could we do that? So we wanted to lay those out to get your wheels turning even a little more than they were before you came. Next slide, please. We also, again, in terms of framing what we wanted to talk about, there are different kinds of action steps that can be taken. Often the first thing people think about is, well, if we just change the law, that'll fix it. But we all know that that doesn't always happen. And so we put policy changes on there because that's what we as council members are supposed to do and often get limited to. And maybe there will be some things that come out of these conversations about specifics that we should change in our municipal code or our property maintenance code, or maybe that we need to advocate for with the state or with the federal government as far as that goes. It seems that most of the policy that we need people are pretty comfortable with, it gets to the next step. And that is to look administratively at what's happening with our procedures. Is maybe that's where the rubber hits the road, of course, and are there ways that we could improve on that? The third item we put is community campaigns. That's broadly defined. It could be neighborhood level. It could be whole community. But that may be what it takes, particularly for things like the vegetation issue, at least to get it to where we want it, so we can all see what it looks like and feels like. And the last then is to change our culture. What we're hoping is that we can all pitch in together. And I will tell you, we've had a tremendous success in the first sessions that we did with people giving us ideas. We'd hoped to hear ideas that we hadn't heard before, and we did. And they're ones that are implementable. Because if we need to change that culture, we need to agree on what that is and see it and feel it and figure out not only how to get there, but how to sustain it. So that's our challenge in terms of those recommendations to us, in terms of what kinds of recommendations they might be. Next slide, please. So we're going to give you some facts and then jump into I'll tell you now that the categories we're going to walk you through to explore will be substandard properties, vacant properties, overgrowth, and trash. So when we get through these background facts for you, that's the order in which we'll ask you some challenge questions and ask for your ideas. Facts. Just wanted to share with you that our property maintenance folks tell us that they're inspecting 6,000 properties a year on average. That means premises, the outside, the yard or the vacant lot, exteriors of properties, and interiors. It's mostly premises and exteriors these days, but they do some interiors on request. Second bullet, our 2020 housing study, which was quite comprehensive, cited that we have 4,300, that's 4,300 substandard structures. And that was only a year ago, so more or less point in time for right now. Next slide. The city of Topeka bills out these are rough average numbers, rounded numbers, but bills out $1.5 million in fines and fees and abatement costs each year, and is only collecting back $960,000. So we've got a gap of $500,000 a year where basically taxpayers are paying to mow people's yards, mow other people's yards, take out their trash, demolish their buildings. It's a lot of money. Next bullet is that most people say that they do want to see more done with overgrown vegetation in yards, in vacant lots, and in rights of way, all over. Next slide. Most people would like to see vacant properties reoccupied if possible, at least have them secured and taken care of by their owners. Many properties people thought needed to be demolished have been saved and restored beautifully, or could have been. And a little sidelight on that is that we have a lot of vacant properties today in Topeka. When your population has gone down by 5,000 households, and you continue to build, it's not rocket science to figure out you're going to have a lot of vacant property. So it's a challenge for us. Next slide. So there's the facts. Again, we came up as a committee with some aspirational goals for change. What you've got here on the slide is a kind of condensed CliffsNotes version of that. You can see the whole thing on the website. The 2 points that we have here are a goal of never having more than 500 substandard properties in our city. We have about 57,000. So that'd be a half a percent. What's that? Half a percent? No. 1%?
10% of the 5,700, it's just around 1%.
Just around 1%. But the idea that there would probably always be somebody who didn't take care of their property that needed a little attention for one reason or another, but to get it down. And second, to have that culture change, to have more owners and occupants take care of and control their properties without code enforcement involvement. That we change that culture in our community. Those seem reasonable to folks?
I would
See
just
your
want to
guess.
add.
Yes.
I would just want to add too, when we talk about the culture change, definitely that's been where some of our most important and stimulating dialogue has taken place over this series of meetings. I also think that we cannot leave out that it's also changing the culture at the departmental level with code enforcement itself, to where they start seeing themselves, and we start seeing them, the city starts seeing them as first responders of sorts. And that is a very crucial way to look at how code enforcement needs to reimagine itself, and we need to reimagine as well as neighbors. So I think it's an and definitely not an either or, but some very good and healthy dialogue on it.
Thank you for that. Next slide. We came up with what your slide says is preliminary recommendations. They were basically, we also couched them as challenge goals. The first was to reduce, with that aspirational goal in mind, to reduce our number of substandard structures by 50% in the next 5 years. The second, reduce deterioration in vacant structures. The third, reduce that expense revenue gap on abatement cases by 50%. That could be done by reducing the number of cases and therefore reducing the gap, or figuring out better ways to collect, or perhaps adjusting the fees based on making sure we're covering our time when we've got people who aren't stepping up themselves to take care of their properties. And last, improve the appearance of the community through management of overgrown vegetation. Thoughts, any nods or thoughts on those preliminary recommendations? We'll get into the details here with your feedback. But those are big goals, but ones that seem like a good place to get started. Next slide. Okay, first section of response questions. Substandard properties. We've seen properties like this, right? So, next slide. Are there comments that people brought with them, ideas, suggestions, strategies to deal with interiors, exteriors, or the process that we use? Are the standards that we have okay? What about our inspection and notice systems? So, comments? Melissa?
Just through working through some issues with the city that we've had, one of the things that I've noticed is the city does offer some really wonderful programs to help lower income homeowners. However, the timelines are very long in terms of when you can use those services. For example, if you have a house fire and you have an unsafe structure, the code enforcement is going to come in and say, okay, we're going to give you this long to look at it to see if you can fix it. And if you can't, you're going to have to go through the court systems. Now, the city offers a program that they will help you demolish houses that cannot be repaired or that are considered unsafe. But you have to, that house has to be vacant for a year. So in the meantime, while we would love for everybody to have insurance and be able to take care of those things themselves, the reality is it doesn't always happen that way. And I think if we could take some of these really great programs that the city has and match them up with timelines of code compliance, it might help us when things like fires or unsafe structures happen.
And if you don't have them already, if you do have some thoughts of what those timelines would be, would you share them? And if not, well, we want to know if we can ask you later if we start working on that.
Oh yeah, definitely. So for example, we had a house fire in December. One of the structures completely burned, and it caught the neighboring property on fire as well. And my father was in the process of purchasing that property when it did catch fire. There was no insurance on it. And we got the deed about 6 months out from when the fire happened. We've been given 3 months from code compliance to kind of get our ducks in a row. And then when I called just to kind of inquire about the demolition, so we're at month 9 essentially on our timeline. We wouldn't even qualify for a demolition until December because the house has to be vacant an entire year before that program could come in and assist.
Gotcha.
So, and then additionally, I know there is grant funding for code compliance issues on housing. The house that completely burned qualified for that in August, and we filled out, the paperwork was there the day that he qualified for the assistance to help him get his home in order. I followed up about 2.5 months later, and I was essentially told, don't follow up again, it's coming. And it wasn't until April that we heard back that he did qualify for the assistance and that they could send somebody out. So that's a very long timeline for grant funding and the paperwork process when people are looking for help. So that's kind of the ideas that I have on those systems. If they could work faster, or if there's something that the homeowner could do to help those systems work faster, it would be really appreciated.
Thank you. And in your case, just to help me clarify anyway, maybe the city wasn't able to help just because of staffing or when funding was available, but they also didn't tell you they just somehow up front, so you might have had to wait, it sounds like, but they didn't tell you whether or not they could help you until 7 months later?
Correct.
Okay.
It was April of 2021 when we got the call and said, hey, we're ready to come help you. We're gonna be able to help you. And at that point, the house had burned, and the city of Topeka doesn't really have any services for fire damaged homes without insurance because they think that all homes should have insurance. However, if you go to get, mortgage assistance or anything like that, insurance is looked at as a luxury. So they don't pay those out. So there's also a gap there as well.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Did you have
Thank you
any
for the
other,
opportunity.
other ideas along these lines separate, or is that's fine? Just wanted to make sure you didn't have another one.
Not on the particulars of exteriors,
Okay.
interior.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have suggestions along those lines? Sylvia? Councilwoman Ortiz?
Thank you, Chair. I would like, kind of along those lines, I would like to see us do something, and I apologize, I have a really bad cold or whatever they have, so if I start coughing here. But I would like to see us do something on the lines of letting people come down and register their properties when they're working on them. I have a lady that just bought a house 2 blocks down the street from me. And of course, this house has been caught on fire, and it was in terrible shape when she got it. And so I went down there and introduced myself to her because everything is strolled all over the yard. She's gutting the whole thing out. And right now with COVID, she's having a hard time with dumpsters. But she's already hauled off 3 things. Somebody called and reported her. So staff had to go out and check on it. And then staff told her she has 2 weeks to get it cleaned up. I think there should be a process that, like in her situation, where they go down and let us know, like sign something, their name, contact information, and let us know that they're doing this. As opposed to then when staff came out, told her she had 2 weeks, she called me frantic because she can't get a dumpster until the 3rd. I had to call Haugen. Haugen said, no, we'll work with her as long as we see process. And she is progressing, but I think it would be beneficial if people would do that and, so one thing, we'll know who the owner is, and the next thing we'll really know what's going on at that property.
Let me draw you out just a little bit, because we all know that one of the challenges with code is just to get people moving. And so one of the reasons the letters set the code and the letters set the deadlines that they do is to get people moving. And I haven't read the latest letters, seen them along the way, but those of us who've worked with them know that if you get hold of the inspector, has the power, and John Chardine is here, Sylvia, that the inspectors have the right to negotiate at least some initial extensions, as does the supervisor. And it sounds like that did happen in her case. The letters tend to scare people when they get them, yet if that gets them going, and so then they make that call. If, for instance, the letter instead said, oh, and if you don't really think you can hit this deadline, just call us and work something out, would it be as effective in getting people going? And I don't have the answer to that, but I think that's a dilemma that the staff has seen when they've tried to write, work on the content of those letters.
I agree, but I also think that we should be trying to work with them, and this would make it something, it would be helpful to everybody, to staff, to this lady, to everybody involved. So that's kind of why I brought it up. If she would have knew that, she would have went down and talked to him, and it wouldn't have wasted staff's time to come out or anybody's time, because you can clearly see what she's doing when you have every single wall out in the yard. You can see what she's doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and they've worked on this. I'm thinking as you talk, if the letter said something like, if you are actively working on this problem already and need to make arrangements, contact staff. I don't think our letter says it quite that way. Maybe there's some ways that the letters could be changed a little bit.
And I would agree with the verbiage. It would be helpful if the verbiage did change a little bit to make it, number one, more understandable. People do get frightened right away
They do.
by it, and sometimes it's more, I'm not saying comforting or reassuring, but it's just if you can be direct to the point and yet not use verbiage they may not understand. I remember seeing a letter come out from utilities about people that were having certain kinds of breaks, and I know this is not related, but the verbiage was very high. It was at a very high level. And I think that when we're dealing with, regular folks or just the majority of folks would like something that was pretty easy to understand and maybe a little bit friendlier, because we've talked about the door hanger idea in a strategic model of code enforcement. So I think that definitely would be beneficial.
Yeah, related to that, I mean, I've had at this point a series of neighborhoods that were involved in the painting, the exterior house painting blitzes that the department has done, and depends on how you read it, I guess, but it's kind of frightening to think that you could get fined $499 a day and get sent to jail for not getting your house painted in 2 months. And so those have been, it's the same letter. So
And if I may add one more thing,
please.
I think each letter should have something in Spanish, because this was a Spanish-speaking lady, and she was really frazzled as well. She knows very little English, and so even if there's something, that there's somebody that she can call.
Just a one-liner, kind of.
And that way, if nothing else, that she would know who to call. But
That's a really good point.
thank you.
Because one of the things we've seen is that a lot of our Hispanic folks have really done a tremendous job in fixing houses up. Tremendous asset to our neighborhoods. So, okay, others.
Chair, this is Councilwoman Nager. I just wanted to add something to that too.
Please.
Thank you. I think it would be more helpful to have more than just one line. If you're getting a whole lot of information thrown at you and you're just told these are some sort of authorities, you have to contact us.
You're fading in and out on us.
Sorry. Here,
Slow down.
we're pulling over. I'm in the car right now. So if we had some way to go ahead and explain more than just, hey, this is the person to contact if you speak Spanish. If we go ahead and explain this is why we are contacting you, I think that would be really helpful. Instead of just slamming them with a bunch of language, a bunch of jargon in English and then expecting them to just follow up and feel comfortable with following up, I think it would be most beneficial to be very clear about, we are contacting you about the state of your property and want to make sure that you have the resources that you need. Contact us at this number for more information. I think that would be the best way to go ahead and clarify that for people.
Did you get that? That was good phrasing. Thank you. You were fading in and out again a little bit, but I think we got your language there. That was good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts?
Nope, I'm good for now.
Okay. We have Ms. Starlin who's online, and then you in the back, and you, Lazone. Go ahead, Lazone. You got your hand up. We need to get the mic to you. I need a mic guy. Come on. He's been the slide turner all the other times, and so he's having to switch gears. Sure, yeah.
Okay. Substandard housing is more, people are living there, and it's just substandard.
Keep that mic up so people can hear you.
I had read there was an article in the Capital Journal on property. karaoke machine. But
No singing. Not till it's over.
But you know, it was talking about mold and things that was in the homes of disabled people and things of that nature there. And this isn't the first time. Of course, in 2013, when Mayor Wogas had his neighborhood summit, and then that had the task force, and then there were 3 subcommittees. There was the things that came at the top was bike lanes, skill training centers in LMI communities, and code compliance. And so the subcommittees were bike lanes in those 2. I was the chair of the LMI training centers in the neighborhoods, and I do accredit that to, we have one out there. There are more bike lanes. What I remember is really the only thing, I think that was chaired by Mark Galbraith at that time. The International Property Maintenance Code was what came out of that summit as a tangible or something. Even when they had the second neighborhood summit, code compliance was at the top. So that was 2013, and the conversation of code compliance is still with us. LMI trade schools, trade skills centers in LMI neighborhoods is accomplished, but it's a bigger process. I wasn't a part of that committee. And so I had mentioned this during that summit then, and I will mention it now because the thought to me has never gone away.
Okay.
Part of the recommendation that led to the Washburn Tech East was not just to have the trade skill classes, but to also have those students who come to a particular point when they're about to graduate. I believe that Washburn University has students doing community service in the neighborhoods, in organizations. I would think that since part of that is building trade, more of this is part of carpentry and trade type of work, that some of the students, whether it's for special credit or what have you, that right about the time that they are graduating, that they could help identify or be a part of the process for community service projects, where they could get the on-hand skills and things and sort of tie that institution to this process. They're learning these type of things, and I think that when we have places like the Restore and other places that may donate paint and other things, that I think that there's some moment of opportunity of tying our building trade programs who are learning to some of this property maintenance, because sort of some people can't understand property maintenance is one thing and code compliance is the other. And even further along that, which I've talked about, other job training type of things, that there must be a way of getting people, especially those who grew up and live in those neighborhoods, to get the training to do some of these things. This doesn't take 18 months or 3 years type of training to do some of the interior things, drywall, painting, stuff of that nature there. And so I believe that it could be cost effective, and more importantly though, getting those students who are learning skills reconnected to the neighborhood. It also gives them the type of skills that when they get their own home, they can fix it up, or maybe start a business of flipping homes. I don't know. But I read through most of the previous comments, and a lot of times it was asking for volunteers and other things of that nature there. I think that there's an opportunity of doing something that is more formal in structure and having students from Washburn Tech in the building trade and maybe some others, and who knows, if it's an electrical problem, maybe there's some things that can work out with the apprenticeship, type of programs. On-the-job training and on-hands training is one of the most valuable things that a person can get in their training, other than just the book knowledge within itself.
Yes.
I think that sort of connects people back to a community, because you can walk away proud that I helped that lady there fix her ramp. I helped abate that mold. And they would probably be able to get some type of credentials, such as if you're dealing with interior or exterior paint. In older homes, you're probably going to have a lead paint issue. So they can probably get that lead-safe work practice or worker credential too. So that's my comments on this here.
Let me just say that the very first meeting we had at Hillcrest, I don't know how far back you looked in the notes, but in the database that we have, the portal we have of all the information, I gave you credit for those ideas about utilization of Washburn Tech East. And the folks in Hillcrest nodded quite often about that, as well as an elder that had, I don't know if you recall his name or not.
It was Daryl Stewart.
Yeah, I obviously don't know that. But I mean, and he said about the importance of getting youth and males in the community, those type of learning programs. So I just wanted you to know from the get-go, we're like, y'all need to talk to Lazone because he has got just so many good ideas that are community-based and empowerment-based. So we would definitely like to, I want to continue this conversation with you because it's real.
You know what's striking me about it is that I have some years back now, when it was before Washburn Tech East, had talked, for instance, about our brick streets and sidewalks with the dean there at the time, saying, when we'd kind of looked around, there are a lot of cities that are trying to preserve their brick streets and sidewalks and not a lot of experienced tradespeople to do that. And so I was saying, well, why don't we get a program going for that? Because those skills could end up with a regional company. And he was sort of interested, but said not right now, and kind of come back later. And in a nice way, they just started the HVAC program and some other things, and so that was fine. And when Washburn Tech East came in, I saw him as he was leaving, and he said, "Make sure you talk to the new dean about these things." But I remembered that it just didn't fit, and even with the HVAC program, his comment along the way had been, well, we want our students to get experience, but not to have them be free labor all over town, and that kind of stuck with me as well.
Well,
but
is more of a specialty, but when you're dealing with some of these interior and exteriors,
well, where I wanted to go with that was I had not connected the dots with the main Washburn campuses, whatever you want to call it. The philosophy is more than that they'd adopted about that same time, that they wanted every single Washburn student to have a community experience. There were like 4 pillars in it. One was an international experience, one was a community experience, and whatever those other 2 were. And I had not connected those across the way you just did. That certainly I would think that that they would want the tech students to have that same immersion experience that the liberal arts students would have. And I'd never asked about it, but we want everybody to have those same opportunities, right? So that could be a way that fits. That's great.
that's all I had.
Well, thank you for that. Sometimes you get the good ideas and then you do still have to connect the dots. That's good. There you go. How about in the back? Because these are staff, and we'll find out if Susan and Kim, who've been so diligent making the rounds, just wanted to hear, or whether you all had something to contribute. But do you have something? I have a question. Okay, go ahead. As soon as our mic guy gets there, yeah.
Well, my question is about your goal, the substandard properties, and how you define those. I mean, the pictures on the screen were those are pretty obvious, but things like a falling gutter, peeling paint, do those also go into that number of how do you define a substandard property when you are setting your goals?
That is a very good question, and it to some extent it was arbitrary because that's the number and the word that the housing study used. And it looks like Brent may want to do some answering on that. What we did was have some debate. I think Susan was one of the people that early on challenged in our code, if you have a violation, the property is considered substandard. And if everything's right, it's considered standard. So Brent, take it from here.
Yeah, what Councilwoman Hiller stated is accurate. And so one of the things that we're going to have to do is determine as a committee what we want to label as substandard, because I think there's so many variations. We need to settle on that definition as we finish this process. Okay. And I think that's something that our committee is going to have to work with staff to fully understand. What things do we consider as a group to be substandard, and maybe even create our own definition rather than the definition that's been provided to us. Because I think it's important for us to figure out what is it that we want to accomplish. Is it peeling paint, or is it something more? And determine also that substandard, I think, also doesn't necessarily refer to trash in the yard or grass. That's not a substandard structure. That's a substandard living condition that we don't want to pursue. So making sure that we clearly define where we're at. And so I think that's one of the steps that we'll have to take in committee with you.
So are you going to work with the staff to give us like an A list and a B list?
Yeah, we will do that. And
Good.
I've already talked to Mike. That's something that, as we've gone through this process, Mike Haugen and I have been talking about. We really need to nail that down. And so we'll provide some sort of definitions for you to consider. And then from there, let you hone it down into what you'd like to see as a recommendation.
Well, good. Get that down. You get that down, right, LaToya? Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala and I were talking as we started about just how we were going to sift all these big lists down, and we were taking it somewhat upon ourselves to do that. So good deal. We'll appreciate that contribution to bringing it down. Okay, good question. Thank you so much. And it drove an idea. So anything else on this? If not, we will move to the next slide. Melissa?
Councilwoman, I might have one more thing to add if I could.
Yes, please.
So as we were just talking about, substandard properties and whatnot, and looking forward to meeting some of the goals in reducing that number, one of the things I thought about is for permitting, in order to work on a home, you have to live in that home and it be your primary residence when you call to get a permit. So I think as we look forward, in order to get a permit for a house that you cannot live in or that it is not livable at that point, you have to have a licensed contractor, from my understanding from speaking with city permits. The issue with that is we have these homes that need work. We have qualified people. For example, if the volunteers came through Washburn, if that is an idea that was put into place, they might not be licensed and insured contractors. But if we partnered with them to do the work, how would permitting go in that type of way? So as we look forward to meeting some of these goals, I think looking at permitting as an issue or something to be more aware of might be important as well.
Bingo. Thank you for bringing that up. We ended up, I had a situation just like what you're talking about earlier this year where a gentleman had bought a property in District 1. It was bad enough that he couldn't live in it. He hadn't decided for sure whether he was going to live in it forever himself or whether he was going to flip it. But he knew he couldn't live in it while he worked on it because it was in too bad a shape. And he ran into the permitting thing as well. Of, did he have to get a license as a contractor? He was pretty honest. And so he said, I know how to do this stuff. I've done it all these years. So that's a good point. And last night up at Garfield, we had two young men who have been working on rehabbing and flipping and also wanting to do infill. And we were able to answer, we think, to kind of clarify some assumptions they had about zoning that they thought were prohibiting infill, and we need to review that, but we're pretty sure that the zoning is more flexible than they thought. But the same question about permitting, and they said that were actually they were aware of about 10 people like themselves who wanted to do that kind of work and could do it. They didn't need incentives. They didn't need a program. They didn't need a land. They just wanted to buy houses and fix them up in neighborhoods. And so we committed to them last night that we would absolutely, it was just so clear that putting together a roundtable on that needed, just like the youth employment program, it was obvious, that was such an obvious takeaway. So thanks for bringing it up tonight, because that's a different dimension on it that needed to come up as well.
And it really is. Thank you so much for that, because this is very timely what you're saying, because if you knew the in-depth conversation we had with these two young men, I was so impressed that they were choosing to go into North Topeka and living in North Topeka and wanting to do this, not having an issue with code. They're down with being inspected. They were open to all of that. They just wanted to get a better understanding of working through some of the minutia with permitting, and also they were not seeking all kinds of incentives, which was just tremendous. These were full-time working young men that flipped maybe 1 or 2 houses, a year. That's it. And they just wanted a little bit more accessibility and understanding and to bring these other young men on board. So, we told them we couldn't make promises, but what we did totally encourage and commit to them is, just like Karen said, is that we were going to have this roundtable discussion because, again, as we're talking about the issues that we have with housing in this city, we need these type of young folks, and we really want to move forward on it. So thank you so much for bringing that up.
Yeah, definitely. And I appreciate the feedback and I'm looking forward to those roundtables happening. One additional thought too is, even you have very experienced people, like my stepfather has built houses since I was young and I'm 31 now. And he can't even go in and help us rehab our fire damaged house because he's not licensed and insured. So I'm just looking forward to those roundtables, and I appreciate that consideration.
Thanks. Let's go to the next slide. Vacant properties. We've all seen ones like this. This is structures as well as just the land. Next slide. So we're talking about structures and lots that are vacant intentionally, where people just moved out and buttoned them up. Ones that are abandoned. That happens for various reasons, often because the owners have passed away and heirs aren't prepared to step in one way or another, but there can be other reasons as well. Issues include security on those properties and mowing and dumping. So our challenge question to get the conversation going is, what more can we do to prevent issues and or get owners to take care of them? Ideas, strategies. Anybody? And if we don't have any, we'll move to the next slide, but we wanted to give everybody the opportunity to, Lazone? I think so.
Good.
And maybe to share.
All right.
But this is really a question. What do you do about the moving and the dumping now? Or the mowing and the dumping? I'm sorry.
Well, what happens overall is that obviously the owners are not mowing. They're not there to notice when the dumping occurs, but the neighbors are, and they are struggling with that. And so you can get this round robin of the code people coming out and writing it up, and eventually, not once every 2 or 3 weeks like people like to see, but maybe once or twice a season, getting in there and mowing grass that may be 4 or 5 feet tall. Some of them are in town now. They haven't been able to get to them. And then hauling off, bringing a prisoner's crew or whatever and hauling off the stuff. Sometimes, though, what happens, especially if that continues, is that the neighbors start to mow it. And the neighbors, they'll call somebody, or maybe and one of the things that's happened in some of the neighborhoods is that we've realized that the refuse, Shawnee County, will come and pick up big things, which is often what gets dumped, once a week. You don't even have to call in advance anymore. And so even though you're kind of mad about it, some of the neighbors have learned you just haul that lazy boy down the block a little bit and just get rid of it. So sometimes the neighbors have begun to take care of it. Most of us know that if a lot appears to be taken care of, it's a whole lot less likely that people will dump on it. So there's an incentive in that way. Some of the discussions that we've had so far have had to do with neighbors working together just to keep an eye on properties if dumping has occurred, so that the prospective dumpers know somebody's watching. Some things like that. It's kind of hit and miss on every property at this point. We also, most of the neighbors want them turned over, so people can look up and see if the taxes are delinquent and try and get them on a tax sale if they've not been paid at all. But, if the city does the mowing and or the cleanup, that gets attached as a lien on the property. But a lot of times we don't get the money back. If it goes to the tax sale for $300, we might get the first $300, but that might not cover what we've got in it.
So
like
it
that.
is the city that they will mow it and send the bill to the absentee
Right.
and they don't pay.
And they don't pay. So we spend all
maybe
this
they will.
time, going inspecting, sending certified letters, mowing, abating, and then losing it.
And I'm sorry if I'm asking too many questions. I'm
That's
just trying to
important.
understand.
No, it's important.
And so, is there a company that the city contracts to go and pay for these to abate the mowing? And I'm really just sort of focusing on the mowing right now.
Years ago,
Or city employees?
It's a combination of a crew manager and inmates, crews that go out and take care of the mowing and any trash removal type things for abatement.
Okay.
and years ago, the city would contract them out generally in batches to private companies.
Okay.
Kind of shifted to having their own crews and the inmate crews, which seemed like a win-win over time.
Okay.
State has changed some things about the way they deal with their inmate crews, and so we've lost one this year that we're using for mowing, and so we need to. It's very timely to come up with another alternative.
So is that inmate crew, is that the one that was funded through on that sheet there, was that through the Consolidated Action Plan identified?
Mm-hmm.
So getting to my final point is, again, I think that would be a transitional jobs opportunity for people who are not inmates but who are in the community. Again, it would be some work. It would help them get involved into the social services, the things that they need to do. I think that reconnecting people to their community where they feel that they are doing work in their community and doing work that is meaningful and that other than the wages that may be paid by the supervisors, those could be wages that could be paid to individuals who meet certain criteria so that they can be helped to get the work ethic, get some skills, and then we can move them on into some other type of full-time employment. And then transitional jobs, which is a meaning within itself, I believe that may just be I firmly believe that that's a better alternative than just having inmates, because these are people that could be paid, that can help them better with their financial literacy, pay down their child support, pay down other bills. And again, it's in their community. So whenever the roundtable gets, I'm just going to still continue to advocate for transitional jobs of people who are out in the community to doing this type of work other than just having inmates.
Thank you. And, that actually answers some of the dilemmas that have come up as people have talked about that before, in that what's happened with the state is now they want the inmates to be paid an hourly wage, though their plan is to take a good chunk of that to pay for their incarceration expenses. So anyway, but some of the discussion further as we went during the city budget this time was, well, how many of those people would be settling in our community? And of course, you can't be sure. What you're proposing would be people who already, one way or another, are at least partially settled in our community. So,
and are a part of systems like they may be non-custodial parents who are behind in child support, which can help them out. And by helping them get off into the various state-funded programs that they're eligible for. I try to blend the resources that's available with the city, the county, the state, and the federal, so that if they are in a transitional program, they would be eligible for more support services, transportation, tool allowances, other type of things that really can make them as a whole individual in the community, and trying to get them linked up into other services and things of that nature there. So that's sort of one of the benefits that many people don't know, what benefits and resources are available to you because you're poor, but they are there. And if they don't know about it, then they don't go and take advantage of those programs.
right.
And I think, Lizanne, I think that there's really good points in that, and I think that we need to continue to delve into that to see what the possibilities are, because again, these are the type of ideas that we saw flowing out of Hillcrest. Additionally, what I've been hearing, and we're going to be meeting at Lundgren next Friday, but one of the things that I've been talking about with neighbors and that came up in the discussions too is youth let's take, for example, Oakland Youth. In our Oakland page, they're looking for lawn mowing opportunities. And it's a good way for high schoolers as well to get a job, to understand the dynamics of their own community and get paid for it as well. So it's a win-win, I think, on so many levels for us to seriously start to consider these type of programs. Because again, the focus is on community and the people that reside in the community. And safety. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, and I might have misunderstood something you said, but you probably can't get rid of the expense for the supervisor. I think one reason, various people have talked about these programs before, and when we talked with Mike, it turned out that he was like going, and that's because he didn't see his department managing that program. But I think one of the things that's kind of emerging as we have these meetings is that we do have, maybe we need a new program, but we have individuals who have that kind of experience, training as well as managing a crew of people who are learning skills, and also nonprofits that we could certainly see if we wanted to do something like that, to bid it out and see, put together some specifications for how the program would run and give it a whirl. So thank you. Got a hand in the back, Runner, Mr. Runner.
So I was really happy to see the language in your PowerPoint about reducing deterioration in vacant structures, because I think when I read some of these, it's almost like a vacant structure equal abandoned structure, or vacant structure equals, is a synonym with something that's deteriorating and dilapidated. And I know earlier, or last year, or earlier this year, whenever it was, when the vacant house registration, I'll admit it, we have a couple of houses that do not have anybody living in there. But in a couple of cases, that is very intentional. And in some cases, that is because of some of the situations in the neighborhood, because we've had people who have broken into those houses, and we have been advised to leave those places vacant for a while so things kind of die down. So I really like the fact that maybe there's been some differentiation between vacant and something that's abandoned or deteriorating. Mm-hmm. So I think, too, as you look toward maybe some of the code enforcement issues, and, I'm hearing maybe a kindler, gentler code enforcement, or however you want to say it, that maybe we can take some of that into consideration, too. Because I'm just pretty certain that the whole vacant registration is probably going to come back around again in a big way, and that maybe that we can look at some of those factors, and really especially the piece about reducing deterioration, because our vacant properties are not deteriorating. In fact, they're being improved, but by not having somebody living in those houses.
Thank you for that, and good points. And of course, many neighborhoods have had a vacant house for years, and they're kind of wallpaper as long as nothing happens. Yet everybody wants to see them reoccupied. Families have a hard time letting go when that's where they grew up, and so it's more than just give us your property, too. Do we have a comment?
She had her hand up. I don't know if she took it.
Melissa?
I have some feedback on grass and dumping, if now would be the time.
Is this on vacant properties?
It could go either way. I can wait if there's a better time for it.
We end up getting ahead on grass and dumping.
Okay, I'll wait till it comes back up again.
Okay. Let's go ahead and move on. If I don't see any other hands. Overgrown property. We've seen those. So those could be just grasses, just tall grass. Can also be the trees and shrubs and vines that we've talked about. So the questions, the conversation starter questions are, What can we do to see properties and blocks, whole blocks, maintained without write-ups at all? And can the community do an initiative to get trees, shrubs, and vines cut back the first time? Do people have ideas for who partners might be to get that done, and strategies to maintain those improvements once we get there? And maybe if anybody else has a hand, that's fine. Otherwise, we'll get Melissa back on here. And go ahead.
You ready for me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So for just overgrown properties, I was thinking about this the other day because I have some trees that are in some serious need of some trimming. However, tree trimming is very expensive for those that have looked into it. I don't know if there's somebody that we could partner with on tree trimming to where maybe they come and every 2 weeks they cut a tree limb off, and it's going to cost you $20 or $40 or, it's not going to cost you $500 to $1,000 a month. Can we find a company or an organization that's willing to come cut up 1 or 2 branches every so often to help people trim their trees back and get them under control again? So that's one thought just about tree trimming. But as for overgrown properties and mowing, one of the things that I had thought about as I dealt with some family issues in the city is sometimes property owners do not have funds, and they're being assessed these fees, and you guys aren't getting your money back out of it. The homeowner doesn't have the money to pay it. Would it be an option to develop a program where you came to the people that owed money to the city and said, look, we have these lots and they need mowed all summer long. This is the amount that we're willing to write off of your bill for abatements or code issues. Can we work together to reduce the city's overhead, but also find additional ways to pay off the debt to the city from the property owner's perspective?
What an interesting idea. Both of those are really good. We had some conversation in earlier sessions. There used to be a program called the Neighborhood Enhancement Program where people could earn points by helping their neighbors. And it really did help build neighborhoods and help people get those, similar to the odd job things, or the, somebody who knows how to rewire an outlet, or, you just do it, right? Even people did roofing, helped each other roof their houses or paint their garages and things like that. And there were some administrative problems with that program, so it went away. But it always keeps coming up that people think that neighbor helping neighbor thing would, for the most part, you shouldn't have to buy people helping people, right? But that trade-off program where you could earn points and then you cash it in for materials, which some people gave away to their neighbors. It just kind of worked out, and I don't think we've heard of an idea like yours where people could work off their bill, but that, who knows? What a good idea. And back to your first one, having done landlord-tenant counseling and homebuyer counseling for years, the issue of when somebody needed a tree trimmed and it was on their property, not on the city right-of-way, so that the city wouldn't come out and do it, it does come up. And nobody's raised that issue yet, as we've talked about overgrowth, and that's a really good idea. I happen to know that if you've got a really big tree, part of that cost is that they're driving out with a crew and a boom truck, so you don't want to do that more than once. You're come out there with a boom truck and do it, and they've got to pay for that truck and getting that crew out there and so on. But I remember along the way, there's some guys that do the same sort of work with just harnesses, and they climb that tree and cut off this stuff, and it's pretty amazing. And those guys are a lot cheaper than the ones who bring the boom truck. One of the things that we talked about was, and the city so far has not wanted to do it, but it's been kind of popular, was doing just a resource listing of everybody in town who said they're a tree trimmer, or that they could help trim trees or help build decks or fix gutters or whatever. The city's worried about it because of liability, but it has come up again that maybe people have said, if you could just help, that a lot of people don't do the repairs they need when they get written up by code because they're not comfortable with that and they don't know anybody and they don't know how to interview somebody either. And so the idea of just doing some educational programs has come up to help people learn how to look for help and how to check references and so on to make sure they're getting somebody that's reliable, of course. And people don't know for sure when somebody needs to be licensed or bonded and things like that either. It can get in the way of hiring the right person at the right price. So you've raised some really good points there. Other thoughts on the overgrowth?
I would like to mention something from the issue.
Okay.
And it goes to the Glenda Washington's division.
Okay.
You know, they fund and they're helping entrepreneurs. And so therefore this may be an opportunity for someone as an entrepreneur groomed over the time to whereas this would be something that can be a good investment 3 ways around or so.
That's a good idea. You know, something that's come up in different circles, not so much from these, but if we've got the folks over at Go Topeka who are training entrepreneurs, offering the shingle, you know, if we've got kind of hopefully a short list of trades that we need more people in, both to recruit people to the tech schools like you were talking about, but also to encourage entrepreneurs, that there really is a market for lawn services, let's say, or tree trimming, or used to be we didn't have anybody doing caning furniture, for instance, and fixing only one shoe shop and things like that. Maybe that could help as well. I mean, if you feel like, oh, why would I probably couldn't compete in that market if you don't know whether there's a need really for what you want to do.
But could help identify.
Exactly.
Some of those who have gone through the program and are available and they're hungry.
Exactly. Good thoughts. Others on the overgrowth? Okay, let's go on. Next slide. Trash. There you go. So, trash generally comes in 2 ways. One is the residents themselves are acquiring it, whether they're hoarders or not, or like to buy and sell stuff. Their whole yard's full of stuff all the time. And then the other is dumping, where somebody else just came and dumped whatever. So our challenge questions are there suggestions that people have regarding residents who keep accumulating trash or hoarding? What we could do to reduce that problem? And second, solutions to prevent dumping. Thoughts?
I have some if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Perfect. So on dumping specifically, I think if we could expand behind the Expo Center on Saturdays, I think it's from 10:30 to noon. There are a couple of large dumpsters, and that is completely ran by volunteers, from my understanding. If we could expand that service so people had access to those dumpsters more frequently, I think that would be a really wonderful expansion for people that are dumping trash. Additionally, if there could be a tire bin there, that would help a lot. I know we've had a lot of tires dumped. And then my other thought is fleeting me, so I might be quiet for a minute and see if it comes back and let somebody else speak.
Okay, fair enough. Other thoughts about trash or dumping? How to address it when the neighbors are doing it themselves? How to address? Talked about the dumping a little bit already.
Yeah, the additional dumpsters coming up, et cetera.
The additional dumpsters have come up. You know, for those who are here, one of the ideas that came out earlier was that the NIAs through the city's program have been allowed kind of an allowance to have a once a year dumpster in their neighborhood, but the city has required that you get 2 dumpsters or nothing, and you can just do it once a year. And some folks thought that, kind of along the lines of what Melissa said, that if instead it was maybe citywide twice a year with locations all around the city so that everybody in town knew that it was dump weekend in the spring and another one in the fall or whatever, that might be more effective and might, therefore, when people say, well, I missed it, where can I go? More information. That's the Chesney Park NIA's project that Melissa was talking about at the Expo Center, which is awesome. Still would require some volunteers you got to babysit those dumpsters overnight to make sure people don't go put a couch on top of it or set it on fire or something like that. But those thoughts came up because people were saying that one of the reasons some people dump is because they don't have a truck or they don't have the dump fee. They don't have $75 to go pay to go to the dump themselves. So, even coupons or something like that, or people that like to help out, if that stimulates any more ideas from those who are on today.
Has there ever been any type of survey, which I'm not being facetious, but it is kind of serious but silly at the same time, on reasonings, actually asking people why they dump their trash? I mean, it may come down to exactly what you're talking about.
Not sure that many people get interviews.
No, but you know what I'm saying when you put out a random survey or something, and you're just asking for zip code versus all types of information, but it is such a problem. It really, really is. And is it coming down to the finances of it all, or the transportation, the lack of transportation, or people just waiting till they have so much accumulated and then they're like, well, okay, now I'm just going to go where it's easier to dump it.
Or, they have to clean out the car eventually because they can only have so much trash in the car. So once it gets full, then you have to, put it underneath you don't want to smell you don't want to smell the dirty diaper in the car. It's better, to waste it, right? I mean,
I guess, honestly, I wasn't even thinking of the homeless. I was thinking of residents that rent houses and that actually might live in a particular neighborhood, because that's what automatically comes to mind. Since my husband served back on council 100 years ago, there was an issue with trash, and it was mostly done by residents that were there, not so much the homeless. So that, it makes sense what you're saying, but that wasn't even where my mind was going with that. But I understand what you're saying.
We do have a couple of landlords here and people that live in our older neighborhoods who many of us have experience with the tenants emptying their house and just dumping it all out on the curb when they move out, or a landlord who either themselves or whoever they get to help empties the house and just puts it all on the curb. Some suggestions. Looks like Councilwoman Ortiz has an idea on that.
Well, I just have a comment.
Okay.
A lot of these people dumping don't even live on our side of town. That we've caught people that have been paid to remove property that has dumped in different areas of East Topeka, and so that's why I always get frustrated and say East Topeka is not a dumping site. And I try to tell people to go through. If you can identify them, then we can charge them. We've had people just drive down the street and push out a couch in the middle of the street, keep it moving. And then you have the people that they get paid to haul off the wood, or to pay to get haul off the trash, junk, furniture, whatever. and they don't want to pay to get it dumped, so they'll just find a dumping spot so they can take that money and do what they do with that money, whether it's drugs or bills or whatever. Chesney, that NIA, they went to Philadelphia, and it was I think it was Pennsylvania maybe, and they were really, really clean, and their town was clean, and they asked them, how do you keep it so clean? And they said, well, we have free dumpsters for the people to bring it. And so Chesney spearheads it, but East Topeka South is a part of that. They sign off on it. Quinton-Steele Heights, they sign off on it. We had to have 4 NIAs, and I believe East Topeka North signs off. And so our residents can go over there and take their stuff, and they got people that go over and strip. They do a lot of stuff, but that's the problem. Is it's not always our residents that are putting trash and dumping. It's other people from the other side of town. So to say, hey, we'll have some dumpsters over here, I think that's great. The only caution we need to remember is when we have these contractors, that want to fill up our dumpsters. And that's why ours are monitored like that, because, we don't want, it's not for contractors, it's for residents, and that's why I encourage the NIA cleanups, because people will just take stuff and throw it out there, and then they don't know what to do. And then also just to try to educate them that the trash people are not going to take any kind of recliners that has metal in them.
Right.
And so just the educational part, but that's what's so frustrating to me is it's not always our neighbors. It's people across town that get paid.
Yeah.
So that's frustrating. Yeah, we are the victims, unfortunately. Solution, I don't know what the solution is, other than to try to catch them, other than to, I've set up things and we've gotten tags. Well, the truck was stolen, so that didn't work real well, but I just tell my residents all the time, just, we have to watch each other. We have to be our own eyes and ears and see, because, one thing I've noticed is people on this side of town, in Oakland and North, the low to moderate income people, they take pride in cleaning up their yard. They really do. And, Karen, you said if we keep it clean, they won't dump. That's not always true. We've had them dump. I've had people throw stuff in my yard, just going down the street, I said it helps. Yes, it does help. It does help. But, I called the police chief because we had a couch and a bed and a chair and a table. I mean, I don't know what the solution is other than to keep watching, and hopefully we can catch them, because they're everywhere. And I know Mike can contest to that. They're everywhere.
Thanks. Other thoughts?
I have one additional thought.
It's so easy to get replacements. Oftentimes people get rid of stuff because they know that they can get nicer stuff later by just donations.
Could everybody hear online? She was just saying often she thinks that it happens somewhat because people can get replacements. I know we see that in my neighborhood a lot with just clothing and stuff like that. People just toss it and get new. Yeah, it's not just couches that get dumped. It can be clothing and, of course, trash. Melissa, did you have something else?
Yeah, I have one more thought, just back to the question number 1. How can we help residents from accumulating or hoarding trash? One system that we've put in place, and I don't know if it would be a neighbor or a volunteer, but for my particular situation, I do what's called a Sunday check-in. And every Sunday I go by and I kind of help pick up, have a conversation. We might have some dinner or something, and we get ready for the next week. So is there a system that we could put in place to help people get organized every week. So they're not continuously accumulating items, and ensuring that what they do have stays organized so it's not a chaotic mess all over the yard. I don't really know how we could implement that, but it's just an idea that seems to be doing okay for my situation, so I thought I'd share it.
Thank you for that, because for you, that's a family member that you've just struggled to figure out how you could help, right? I know that the issue of mental health assistance and hoarding and just education on a lot of these things has come up through the process of these input sessions we've done, and maybe that ought to be on the list as well, with just some, maybe you, I mean, I haven't heard that one, but it makes sense. And that, you know, when it's a family member, how do you do that? Or when it's your neighbor, how do you do that to really be supportive and caring, but help them from not repeating that and ending up with John's people out there writing them up and cleaning it up. That's true. Other thoughts on those questions? All right, let's move toward wrapping up here. Okay, again, wrap up, repeat on questions. More thoughts on efficient inspections or notices, issues of compelling fines, better social service systems, stronger neighborhood systems, community campaigns. Any more thoughts? Again, no obligation. And if you have them later, please send them in through that portal on the website, or send us an email or something, because we're eager to hear. We really are. Next slide. Our time frame is that for the most part, what we'd like to do is set those goals and reach them by 2026, 5-year goals. Does that seem reasonable in terms of a time frame? And the last question is, of those who are here, I know we're kind of small in numbers, but are those of you who are here willing to help us reach these goals? Appreciate it. Appreciate it. The ideas, and then it takes action. Next frame. So our goal as a committee is to get all these responses gathered together, and in between the months of October and December, see if we can fine-tune these plans to sift through them all, so that at least we've got some first-year initiatives that can start immediately in 2022. And those do seem to be falling together. We want to thank all of you on behalf of the Public Health and Safety Committee, City Manager, Property Maintenance Division, all the other departments that have been so helpful. Fire, Police has been here often, other council members who are online with us this evening. Thank you so much. We've got two more slides to share, I think. Those of you who are live have a print copy of this packet. If you're online, you can get it. Contact information for all three of us on the committee is on the end of this slide set, as well as how to reach Mike Haugen, the head of the Property Maintenance Division, and our assistant, Liz Toyne, at the council office. And if you need somebody else, they can help you connect through to that. And last but not least, our next committee meeting is the 13th of October. So hopefully, if you have some lingering thoughts, if you could get them all into us by the 30th of September, which is the last date that we have a meeting. That last session is at Lundgren at 6:30 p.m. on October 13th, the last of our neighborhood sessions. Anybody who missed from any neighborhood is welcome to go and join them in Oakland at that session. But if we could get all the comments that people can think of by that end of the day, the 30th, we will start putting them together and sifting through to come up with actions and solutions to move us forward. Again, thank you. With that, we are adjourned. There was 30 people on Facebook watching. Oh, well, that's a less than 7. Kirshner's dad got